What are you learning about people's ideas, knowing that this age issue was already alive and well before the debate?
Now, we have now 3 polls, one pre-debate, right before the debate, one right after the debate, and one today. A general poll of the national population. Mm-hmm. And we found several things. First, everyone agrees that he did not do well. That is, Biden did not do well in the debate. It doesn't matter what poll it was, what measure it was across the board. It was really a poor performance. Indeed, our wording was terrible. 73% of those that watched it said it was a terrible performance. Wow. And so there's no sort of disagreement there. That said, we are not finding an impact on the primary political outcomes that matter. Voting intention, favorability scores, approval ratings. So thus far, everything's changed, but nothing's changed.
How about that?
Okay, so maybe you're not seeing any real change in polling, but certainly you're still seeing plenty of fretting on the part of those in the Democratic Party. You have also found in this 1 in 3 Democrats think Biden should quit the race. That's not an insignificant number, 33%.
Yeah, that's a chunky number. Now overall, 56% of Americans think he should step down. Mm-hmm. A chunk of that obviously being driven by Republicans. 1/3 is a lot, but he still controls the base. Right now, things can change over the next few weeks, and we will have to see. But today, he still garners a majority support among Democrats.
Mm-hmm. I'd love to ask you about some of the names that we're hearing about here. But the reaction to this debate, to your point, is one that is not up for debate. We even heard from the White House today about how difficult this was. Congressman Quigley was, for instance, speaking about this earlier. I think this was on MSNBC. Do we have that? It was on CNN. Thanks. This is the congressman, a Democrat from Illinois. Let's listen.
We have to be honest with ourselves that it wasn't just a horrible night. But I won't go beyond that out of my respect and understanding President Joe Biden, a very proud person who has served us extraordinarily well for 50 years. But it's his decision. I just want him to appreciate at this time just how much it impacts not just his race, but all the other races coming in November.
Well, for whatever that's worth, it's another voice. We heard from Congressman Seth Moulton on earlier today that talked about the active conversation that's being had. And we have now a Democratic congressman from Texas calling for Joe Biden to drop out of the race. So the question then becomes, well, who else? And I don't keep hearing the name Kamala Harris in that conversation. How about you?
Oh, we actually tested her in our poll.
You sure did.
And she actually does pretty well. And I think, reflecting on it a bit, to what extent, we don't know, obviously, but to what extent might there be a rally around the banner effect? In other words, independent of the name, could basically the base step up and support whomever is there if he were to step down? We don't know that. That's something that's unknown at this point, but it's something interesting to reflect on.
Yeah, this kind of question is, does it matter who the other option is if it is another option, which so many have signaled in polling and otherwise they're begging for, that they don't want the choice between Biden and Trump. They want a different choice. So could that be one that they select as another Democratic nominee? But there are also technically different choices out there. Cliff RFK Jr., for example, Cornel West, Jill Stein. Have we seen any transmission from the debate performance into the polling, the way that these third parties are polling, or are Americans not really seeing them as viable alternatives?
Now, we would expect a weakening on the edges, Biden losing a few percentage points here or there. They could migrate to one of these third-party candidates. We would expect that. I wouldn't expect it to be permanent. It would be a temporary fix, let's say, until those voters find someone they prefer or step out completely and they ultimately decide not to vote. But yes, they're still in the mix. We still don't understand how that will all behave, and we have to wait and see.
We keep hearing names like Gretchen Whitmer, Gavin Newsom. Those names were being spoken out loud the night of the debate while we were still in our post-debate coverage here. But they don't come close to the president or the vice president, based on what you
they're depending on how you ask the question, they're 3, 4, 5, 6 points out from Trump. But a lot of that is name recognition. We have to understand that Donald Trump today has 99% name recognition. Most of these other candidates, these Democratic candidates, are in the ballpark of 50 or 60. Perhaps that's something that could be resolved or zeroed out during the campaign, but they do have a name recognition disadvantage at this point.
Although if you're, say, Governor Gretchen Whitmer of Michigan, you have probably very high name recognition in a crucial swing state, which potentially is something to consider. And I wonder, to the extent that we've looked now at your new national polling and you've seen some other national polls where there isn't a lot of movement, do you expect what ultimately will matter most, especially within the Biden campaign, with the president himself making a decision as to whether this should continue forward, is more of a deterioration in those swing state polls, even if you're not seeing nationally that much of a difference? Yeah, national poll is good in quick turnaround to see what's going on. It's a thermometer, directionally speaking. But really, the swing states will matter. And so we're going to have to wait a bit the next couple of weeks. Ipsos has a swing state poll next week, and we will see. But those will be the critical sort of inputs that I believe would be used to make any sort of decision. Do you think it's possible that we could be adding to the list of swing states as a result of this debate performance, say the ones Donald Trump has been talking about, like Virginia and Minnesota, which you've suggested is winnable for him? I think that's possible, but that's really if the dam breaks. Whether it's, is Biden sort of status quo? He didn't gain any ground, but he's not going to lose any ground. Or does he lose ground? We're not quite sure about those two scenarios. If other states are opening up, that means he's losing ground. And he's especially losing ground with those key constituencies that he needs to bring into the fold: Black Americans, Hispanic Americans, younger Americans, and less affluent ones. All I call inflation orphans.